Okay, so good afternoon, Dan. Dan is the co-owner of the Torridon in Scotland, and joins us today on Custard Connect to talk to us about his hotel and the challenges and the opportunities that he's been going through since coronavirus broke out in the UK. So just a couple of questions to kickstart. Welcome, Dan. Where is the Torridon?
Hi, Petra. Thanks. The Torridon's on the northwest coast of Scotland, about an hour and a half west of Inverness, I guess, sort of in line with the top end of the Isle of Skye. So a long way from you.
Okay, so how would I get there?
These days, you're going to be driving, I think, or walking, or biking. But before COVID-19, we had flights in from London, Luton, Bristol, East Midlands, Belfast, you name it. So we were a connected city into Inverness, and then you can ideally hire a car and come out to us, because if you're going to come to our part of the world, you want to probably look around the landscape and stuff. So there is public transport, but typically in the Highlands, it's not that well connected.
And that's really, I think, why we particularly wanted to speak to you today, because we're very conscious that obviously the cities have had huge impact with coronavirus and the restrictions, but we do neglect sometimes those hotels that their setting is their beautiful USP, but actually have probably been through one of the most challenging times because there's no footfall, and people aren't going to be going there on their way to work, or popping in for a coffee or having lunch or dinner. So just talk to me a bit about what's been happening since the COVID outbreak and since you've been under the restrictions everyone else has in the UK, which is to remain closed during that period. What's been happening at the Torridon?
Yeah, so it is slightly bizarre because we're a 58-acre resort on a loch below the mountains. There is no passing traffic. You're right, people don't pass us to go to work, really. At Torridon, I think when COVID-19 came out, we had this bizarre situation of whether we should close or not close, and everybody back around about the 20th of March was having that conversation: do we let the guests stay another night or do we not? And we closed straight away the following day to let people check out. I suppose my first thing was to reassure my team, because there was a lot of anxiety about what was going to happen and what it meant and how long this would be. And I don't think any of us knew where we would be today back then, but clearly it was trying to give reassurance that we would look after our team. So we were very quick to react and say to everybody, stay as long as you want, this is your home, let's see what happens, and go from there. And then we had to communicate with guests. We had a lot of cancellations to make, because clearly even in the early days, it was going to be a few weeks. So we cancelled, I think we cancelled April and May, because it was clear that was going to be the minimum. And we had to reassure guests that we were, it was a temporary thing, and we'd be looking to reallocate their bookings, and we were trying to retain their deposits, cash flow, and try and get them to move their bookings, which, to be fair, probably 90% of our customers did move their bookings, which is really positive for us. We had about 35 staff on site. And we now have 20. We had to stop about 10 arriving because lockdown meant they either weren't going to be able to stay here, or we couldn't look after them, or they couldn't even travel to get here. So we had another 10 who had only started within a few days, and we gave them the option quickly to depart if they wanted to, and we would facilitate that, because lockdown meant they could be here for a long time, and some of them hadn't even started work, but had moved here. And then we were left with our core team, of which 15 are living in at the moment, rent and accommodation and food free, for us to look after them. And we had to set up a program of communication to look after them, really, to find out about their mental health and their well-being, and consider what they wanted to do during these weeks of closure, and just to check in with them and make sure they're okay. And also we had 5 or 6 that were at home furloughed, and everything changed because we all stopped. There was no maintenance, no guest interaction, no reception, the phone wasn't ringing. It was quite a bizarre situation with just me sitting in the office. So I guess we're looking forward and trying to find out what's going to happen.
And that must be such a big step change for you, because, you know, unlike a lot of hotels, you've got that very much that homely feel, the investment that you put into your team and their welfare. And there's obviously a lot of businesses focusing on the well-being of their team. But when you're actually, as you say, you're effectively their landlords, you're their family during that period, that not only are you focusing on your business, but you are really focusing on that team and informing them. Despite what the media is saying, you're obviously having to reassure them. So in addition to that, while you're sat in your office, you're obviously having to work hard to communicate to your existing customers, obviously the ones where you've had to move bookings. Are you seeing people fairly confident in moving their booking to next year, or what kind of trends and pattern are you seeing?
In terms of my customers, I think on the whole, certainly domestically, about 80% of our business is domestic in any one year. So April and May would typically have been domestic majority, and then as we move into June, July, August, September, we'll fluctuate, and probably that would reduce, and we'd see much more international travel, as would be expected for a lot of businesses. So April and May was fine. We had UK customers really, and we wanted to retain our monies for cash flow reasons, like everybody other business, and we wanted to reassure them that their monies were safe, that the deposits were going to be allocated for a future booking. Some went for a specific date, October, November. Others were quite happy to put money on an account. Others took vouchers, which we were happy to do. And probably 10% maybe, I think, gut feeling, wanted their monies back, which was understandable. The vouchers we increased from normal 12 months to 18 months validity, so it gave people reassurance they could come back, within a reasonable amount of time and not immediately. And then I think as we went on, we got into more international travel, and that has clearly been affected far more greatly. And I would say a higher percentage of them wanted their monies back, probably because they're thinking, I may not be back to the UK in 18 months. Whether I'll be allowed to come back is one thing. Whether I want to come back is a completely different subject. And we've seen probably a higher level, maybe nearer 25% wanting their money back from deposit. And many of them have reallocated to the autumn and moved their bookings, and some have taken their money back and said they won't be coming back to the UK in the foreseeable future. So it's a bit of a mixed bag depending on where you come from. But generally, I think the key question for hoteliers at the moment, or people in hospitality, is we sort of know that we're going to open in the next 6 to 8 weeks. We sort of know there are going to be restrictions on the way we can operate, but we have no idea what our consumers want to do and if they are going to be confident in coming back. There's a lot of reports, a lot of sentiment, and we're finding now a lot of questionnaires coming back about what customers are feeling, but I don't think it's there yet to generate enough confidence in us hoteliers to go, yep, when we come back, we're going to open the doors and they're going to come. So we're really trying to find out what that is, and that's going to dictate how we open, what capacity we open. That's going to dictate the rate and various other things.
And I would imagine, people are starting, well, not just starting, but they've been talking about domestic tourism really surging ahead. And I know that your audience is split across international and domestic. And a lot of the UK do travel, and particularly from London, travel up to Scotland and enjoy lots of holidays and breaks away. But obviously, we've also got this challenge of, in some areas, two conflicting messages between the Scottish government and the English government, and some of the policies, procedures and the timelines that they're putting in place. How much is this affecting your business, or is going to affect it upon reopening?
I don't approve of the politics at play when it comes to the devolved governments. Certainly Wales and Scotland are very similar. I've spoken to colleagues both in Scotland and in Wales. We are struggling to be definitive in what we can or can't do. England were given the date of July the 4th in terms of hospitality potentially being able to open in a capacity. As weeks have gone by, that capacity and what the limitations of that have become more prevalent, and people are putting in measures to prepare for that date. We, last week on Thursday, the 21st, were given a roadmap by the Scottish Government of how lockdown and the next 4 phases would work. And actually, this Thursday, the 28th, we enter phase 1, which is the first phase out of lockdown. There are no dates. That's the only date we have.
And you mentioned earlier, I mean, this is about cash flow, isn't it? You know, your revenue is blown apart, and the whole industry can't predict what revenue is going to come through the door. And you've obviously got the costs of running the hotel, keeping the business going, pushing through marketing and reaching out to those customers of tomorrow. Obviously, the furlough packages and the support packages that the government put in place fairly swiftly, I'm assuming that you're quite reliant on those. Do you feel that the government is actually doing enough, or is, you know, the uncertainty around the October deadline when furlough may cease to exist, or certainly from August when it reduces, how concerned are you that there's not enough support from the government, or do you feel they're doing everything they can?
I've had a positive experience, I think, in the sense that we had the rate reduction, which has been a massive lift to us at the resort. We had we have 2 businesses here, and one of them fell under the 51,000K, so we got a grant there. We've deferred VAT until the end of next financial year. We're in our 2nd month of furlough, so we're just putting a claim in now with wages being paid this week. And I've also been successful in securing a grant from a local enterprise company for looking at diversifying the product and solidifying our cash flow as we are. So we were lucky in that we had money in the bank, and you know, we're a business that's been running for 30 years, and part of our success and sustainability has been based on a really strong financial performance. We're prudent, yet we're aspirational in what we're trying to deliver here, and that has proven to be key for us to have cash in the bank. And short term, we're okay, but going forward, it's the seasonality and the rural nature of our business that's really going to hurt. So if we don't have a strong summer season, you really struggle to go through a winter, because you probably make money for 7 months of the year, but then you lose money for 5 months of the year. And the difference between the two clearly is your profitability. And then over the years, we've invested much of that back into the product. But if you're not making it in the summer, so we've already lost May, we're already losing June, July is clearly not going to be a good month, whether we open or not. So then you're into just really August, September, and October. And it's very limited. So clearly every rural business that has the effect of seasonality is going to suffer, probably until, I would say, March, April 22. The initial shock of closing and everything else, cash flow, was immediate, but the real problem became obvious was that we were going to struggle in March 21 initially as we go through the winter. And then depending on what demand is like next year and where we're at, which none of us know, March 22 is going to be the key figure coming out of this. So I'm almost 9 and 18 months ahead looking at my forecasts, trying to work out what we're going to do and how the impact's going to be. But government have done enough for me, but clearly there are others that haven't. I mean, I have, for example, I had 15 staff who can't be furloughed because we recruited loads of people, 20 of them, in February to start in March, but they weren't RTI'd by the 19th because they were monthly paid. They were all RTI'd on the 28th of the month, which is when monthly wages were done for March. They don't qualify. And that's a real shame, because some of those people have moved home, have moved country, and have relocated here, and almost had to turn around immediately and return either home or go somewhere else to find another job, because we couldn't look after them and they weren't going to be supported. With no revenues coming in, that was a difficult decision. But that upsets me that those people weren't looked after. And I know certainly in rural properties that have that seasonality that we're recruiting. In reality, we all recruited for the first week of March because you wanted people to be trained within a month for Easter. Easter was the first week of April, and everyone was the same.